Alrighty, so in this tutorial, basically, I'm going to just show you, you should have your model subdivided. So if you look, I'm up to only subdivision level 4. Subdivided so that you sculpt little details and stuff onto your dude and or dudette. You can see this looks terrible, but you can see the geometry. It's the retopologized version, and it's relatively clean. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, and this doesn't actually need to be done first, but I'm just going to do it first just to make things a little bit easier here. I'm going to go ahead and UV this. Now, to UV, if you've done it in Maya or other 3D applications, it's a real big pain. Here, we're going to do it in a real easy kind of way. So you should be relatively happy with that. So first thing I got to do is I actually got to lower it to the lowest division level. So open up geometry, lower that division. Then we're going to minimize that, and we're going to go down to UV map. And we're going to hit, oh, we don't want to do that yet. We're going to go to create, and you'll see that we have some options here, okay? So what these will do is that it'll create these random tiles. So like if I do, let's say, and there's different, these mean different things, the type that they do, so we don't want any of those. So like packed UV tiles or group UV tiles. Let's do pack UV tiles. And then I can hit pack UV tiles, and then I can morph it. And what it's going to do is it's basically going to break it up into a bunch of these squares. Now, if you look, though, this would work, but your seams and things are not going to be good. It's going to be bad. And plus, if I bring this into, like, let's say, Photoshop to use some of their tools, which are a little bit better than, other painting tools, this doesn't work. So, if you're in a rush or something, you use this, but there's actually another tool that we can use that's like way simpler. We're going to go ahead and delete UV, and I'm going to go up to Z plugin, and you're going to see one called UV Master. Open that up, and we'll go ahead and when active, tries to make UV island symmetrical. Yeah, we'll leave that on symmetry. All the settings actually are fine. We're just going to hit unwrap. We don't have to unwrap all because I only have one model anyway. So we're just going to hit unwrap. It's going to take a second. Goes pretty fast. Yay, it took 1.35 seconds. Now, when I go to morph this UV, you can see it didn't do a great job, but if I hit Shift F, I can see the wireframe. Would have been nicer if that face would have been cleaner. Now, there are ways to actually control this, but I'm not going to really concern myself too much with it right now. But you can see it lays it out. It basically kind of like pelts it. All right, and now the UVs are done. Woo! Not a lot of work, okay? Now, you can start painting before you do UVs. I just like to bang them out earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize that. So I'm just going to morph that. Go to geometry. I'm going to go back up to my highest setting. Now, let's hit Shift F. Now, if you look, the way that the painting works here is like this. It uses the same brushes and the same everything else, but it's based on its poly painting. Okay. Oh, actually, before I even do that, one of the things I want to do is this. Right now, this is using a matte cap material, okay? Which basically, the idea is that these contain both lights and materials in order to give it a real, it's meant to replicate a real-world like system, right? So right now, this is actually like wax. It's red wax, which looks really cool when you're looking at it, when you're sculpting, but he's not made out of red wax. So that material doesn't actually make sense for what I'm making. Now, there's a bunch of different materials, and you can paint different materials too. So I'll just show you. I'm going to leave this on like that. So don't do this. I'm just showing you. Let's fill object. Okay. So I can actually paint, like, let's say I want to do chrome. Oh, I know why that didn't work. Hang on a second. Let's go back to RGB. There we go. Color, fill object. I'm on the right. Yeah. Okay. So I can grab like chrome here, and I can paint just the material onto my dude, and I can paint chrome on just his head. So you can apply materials, different materials to different parts of the body. Now, that's all cool, and it'll work fine in here, and you can make that work in other programs, but generally speaking, it's a good idea to just give him one material over the entirety of him. And use that, right? So unless there's for some reason he's cable and he's got a metal arm or something, it doesn't make sense to really change the materials, even though skin obviously is different than fabric. Stupid pen. It actually makes more sense to just use a real basic material. So because inevitably this would go into a game, and in games we don't really have that option of like mix matching material. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z, and what I'm going to use is basic material. So you either want to use basic material or basic material 2. I'm going to go ahead and just use basic material. And so I'm going to do basic material, and I'm going to make it white. It's good to just start with a basic white canvas, okay? Then what I'm going to do is up here, we've always been on Z add, which means that every time I sculpt, it will be, it'll sculpt onto it, which is fine. But instead of doing Z, I can also do sculpt, Z sub, which will go the opposite. We've been holding Alt to make that work. Now if I hold Alt, it'll actually come out, okay? So we've been using these two. So these are to sculpt with. These over here are M for material, RGB for color, and mRGB for both. I'm going to click that. I'm going to click that. I'm going to unselect these. Now when I go to paint, you'll see it will apply that both the material and the color information, okay? And I just want to make them white to start with. It's just a good way of kind of beginning our thing here. So instead of manually doing it, because there's a chance I can miss little pieces and stuff, I'm going to go up to color. Make sure you have this on first. I'm going to go to color, and I'm going to just go click on fill object, and that will fill the entire object. If you don't do that, every time you go to move something, it will the material will change, and it'll be sort of annoying, okay? So I'm just going to do a plain white canvas, more or less. It's kind of a gray, really, but and we'll start with that. All right. Now what I can do is go through and paint on the character. Now, when I go to do this, so go ahead and turn that off and just do RGB. We don't want to paint the material because it's already that material now. Now I'm just going to change the color that's on the material. Now, when you go to paint this, it's not going to work that well because if you look, it's painting the polys, and basically you can see it blends from one poly to the next, so this poly becomes that color. So unless there's enough polys in here, it will not paint very well. So I'm just going to do that. So I need to up-res this. So you can go over here, or it's Control D, but you hit divide. I'm just going to hit Control D. Control D. I'm going to draw a quick line, and let's see how that looks. It's not too bad. What am I at, 6? I'm going to go for 7. Go for broke. Control D. Okay. And you can see that last one is really... Did it do it? Okay. So now I can get nice sharp lines if I want. That works a little bit better. Okay. So there's so many polys that even though I'm painting polys, it still actually works pretty okay. Okay. Now what I want to do is I'm going to paint what I call my primary colors. So after this, you probably don't really need me anymore, but I'm just going to paint some primary colors. So I'm going to do kind of an off red, and I already have X on, so I'm just going to kind of paint this and hold space bar and make this bigger. Alright, and let's see, focal shift. I'm going to go all the way to the end. Because see when you do focal shift, see how it makes the end tight? If I haven't really messed around with it too much when we've been doing sculpting. If I go the other way, you're going to see what happens is it's going to be very feathered, okay? So if you're trying to make a hard line, take that, not this one, sorry. Take this focal shift and go this direction. I'm going to go pretty harsh. So I'm just going to make his shirt red here. Okay. Oops. Accidentally held Alt. I guess I must paint the other color. So I want to paint this back over anyway. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of try and paint his shirt red. Yada, yada, yada. Alright. Alright, so I'm not going to worry about it being over the line there. Next I'll do his pants, and we'll just do kind of like maybe a little more this way. Do it more gray color. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay. I want to paint his pants. Okay, like that. So on and so forth. Alright, and now here I'm going to actually be a little bit more particular. Now this is where I've been turning it off generally. I'm going to hold spacebar, make it a little bit smaller. Where lazy mouse might be good, because I can get a nicer a more clean line. So I'm going to go to the stroke, and stroke, and click on lazy mouse to turn that back on. And it's still not as strong as I would like it to be, so where are you? Stroke, lazy mouse, and I'm going to make the lazy radius up a bit. There you go. So now that gives me a nice, more clean line. Okay, so now when I draw, it's a little bit easier to create a clean line. So we're going to kind of come up like this so I can see where it's going, and then good. And let's go over here. Boom. Okay. So there's his pants. Boots and pants and boots and pants. Let's just go ahead and, oop, thought I was painting. Just don't really care too much. Yeah, alright. Good. And then we will give him a different color for his shoes. I'm going to go up this way and go more gray again. There we go. Alright, so then I'll go over here. And I'm just going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to paint his shoes. Alright, I'm going to pause this so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to pause it. I'm going to paint all the primary colors, and then I'll start it up again and I'll show you what to do after. Alright, so next what I want to do is I'm going to add a little variation. So I'm still on my hair color here. What I'm going to do is that instead of being on dots, or you might be on freehand here, I'm actually going to switch this over to color spray. And then I'm using this alpha because that's the alpha I use the sculpt with too. But basically, you know what I mean, I'll turn this knot to that so you can see. It just allows me to draw, you know, that kind of thing. So feel free to use those alphas if you need to for when you're painting. But I'm going to switch it to color spray. And what you're going to notice is it basically adds variation. So I'll do it on his, I'll do it on his shirt so you can see it. You see how it puts variation in there? It's also kind of like sporadic. So I want more variation in his hair. So while I have this, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of lightly put this in here so that there's more variation in his hair, and it's not just this one solid color, okay? Because that's generally not the greatest. Alright, let's just like that, and then we'll just pretend like I did a good job. Just picture it in your mind. Okay. And I can do that to a bunch of things. So his hair obviously would have variation. Honestly, even his shirt would. But skin has a lot of variation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this alpha to, gosh, let's say this one. And then I'm going to do back to like kind of a skin tone here. We'll do like, oops, that was a little bit. Okay, we'll say something like that. And I'm going to have the color spray. And what I'm going to do is, let's see how this looks. Okay, so you see it's a bit strong. So a lot of times I'll do this multiple ways. Sometimes I'll brush it like this, and then I'll brush on top of it again, and I'll do multiple layers. I don't really want to cover that quite yet. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to take the RGB intensity and just bring it down a whole ton, and then I'll brush across. And it's subtle, but you will notice that it is adding some change here. Oops, you know what I forgot to do? I gotta put symmetry back on. Okay, good. Because the hair was asymmetrical, so I had symmetry off, which if you remember is X. Anyway, so when I brush this now, it's not like crazy, but it's going to add a little bit of variation because there's all sorts of colors, and I'm just brushing in general onto his skin, and it makes it look much more natural and less I don't even know if it's going to show up in the video so much. I have this pretty low, but it's going to add like a little bit more variation and look a little more natural. So it's going to do it on his face as well. But basically anywhere there's skin, I'm going to go ahead and use that brush to just liven it up a little bit so it doesn't look so like flat. It's one of those things where, like, if you leave it one flat color, it just looks like CG. It just doesn't look good. But by doing this, hopefully, it'll make it look, did a bad job painting. It'll make it look a little bit better. So that's one thing I would do, and you can do that to pretty much everything on him if you want. You could do it to his shirt and stuff as well. So that's one thing. Another thing that we would want to do is what we call pre-shading. And so we can do this a couple different ways. In our case, what I'm going to do is go to, where are you at? Masking. and shouldn't have any masks on. Now, there's a bunch of different options here. So when I make a mask, I can blur the mask, I can grow the mask. I'll just show you. So let's say I hold Control. I can grow the mask here. Grow. Well, it's pretty high poly. Is it? If I didn't make it crash. It's pretty high poly, so it's not... crap. Oh, no. Now I just made it angry. I clicked it too many times. I'm going to pause this, and then when it pops back in, I'll let you know, and hopefully it doesn't crash on me. Oh, good, okay. It'll grow the mask, but it's pretty high poly, so you're not going to see it too much. I'm going to go ahead and clear it. When it's lower poly, it's a little more obvious. You can blur the mask, you can also sharpen it, and you can shrink it. There's all sorts of different things. What I want to do, though, is I'm going to try and do it by... There's two options here. There's mask by ambient occlusion, and then there's mask by cavity, okay? So cavity will work better if you're trying to capture texture. Occlusion will work better if you're just trying to catch shadow. So I'm going to take this occlusion, I'm going to up the intensity to, like, let's say 3, and then I'm going to click on mask ambient occlusion. Now this might take out really blur. Alright, so ZBrush sort of crashed. It kind of didn't crash. It wouldn't have... It'll look like it crashes, so if you go to do something such as this ambient occlusion thing, it's really computationally expensive. But if you go to do that, you may notice that like it goes gray or whatever. ZBrush usually will pull through. Most of the time, like if you're in Maya or Photoshop or something like that, and it looks like it crashed, like it's not coming back. ZBrush usually does push through, but literally it took it like half an hour. So I thought it crashed, so I stopped it. I did it again, and this time it went over and went to do like laundry or something. And then when I came back, it was up again. So, whatever. If for some reason it keeps crashing with this, you can try the mask by cavity. It kind of does the same thing. So what I want to show you is this. So what it does is it basically looks for, it looks for shadow areas. So I'm just going to turn the mask off, and then you should be able to see it. So watch. If I hit Control, click, and drag, watch like the eye in this area. You'll see that it's, see what I'm saying? It basically takes things that look like they're in shadow and puts them in shadow. Okay, so what I actually want to do is invert the mask. So I'm holding Control, click, and then you can see it looks like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dark, we'll do, I guess, like a black color, something like that. Let me see. Oops, we're still on sculpt. Hang on a second. RGB. Okay, and it's on blue, so I want black. I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to take my strength and weaken this up. Oh, not seeing intensity. Take my strength and weaken it up quite a bit. And then all I'm going to do is just, I'll hit X to make sure I'm in. Okay. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of brush in here. Hang on a second. I'm also going to go to stroke and turn off lazy mouse. There we go. All right. And I'm just going to kind of brush in areas like in here. Okay. Let's hit X because the hair is not like that. I don't know how well this is going to... It's working really slow. Brush that in. You know what? I wonder if I did this. Let's do color. Let's fill object. Color, fill object. I think that might be working actually. And then we'll just do it manually too. Okay. So basically I'm just going to brush in where I would think it needs to be. So we'll just kind of blah, 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 blah. It doesn't look like it's doing much, but it is. I promise. And so I'm just going to kind of brush over the whole model, basically, with this really weak black color. All right, so probably could be a little bit stronger because it's not showing up too much. Let me take the RGB intensity. I'm just going to go higher. I would start weaker just to see what it looks like, but I want you to be able to see it, so I'm just going to go a little bit higher than I would typically. Come on. There we go. Okay. And let's back this up. And we'll brush in here. Alright. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. So, actually I did a good job. Oops. That was way too much in there. Well, I'll leave it just so you can see. Okay. Now, when I clear the mask out, can see he now looks like a goth kid. But what it does do is it will put like things that were kind of in shadow a little bit more in shadow. So it's like putting a patina on. So obviously that's like too much. I went a little bit more than I wanted. But there's also you could try this mask cavity, and let's see if this makes it crash. Okay, so if you look, the cavity will pick up these kind of things. But I'm gonna hold Control and tap. You're gonna notice that if I clear that out, see how it's like too harsh. So what you want to do, the cavity actually looks a little bit better. So I'm gonna go like that, and then afterwards I'm gonna hit Blur Mask. And it's going to make it, there you go. See how it blurred out the mask? I'm going to blur it again, because I want it more feathered, and we'll blur it one more time. Okay, and now I'll brush in here, and my brush is way too strong, so I'm going to bring this down to like this-ish. Okay, let's try doing color fill object. Oh, that does work. Okay, fill object, fill object, fill object, fill object. Now I wouldn't do it that way because it'd be a little bit, you might, you're not controlling it as much, but I'm just going to go kind of high with it. All right, now I'm going to clear my mask out. And you're going to see it's another way of kind of picking up the details. Hopefully. So it might be a little bit too much. He's starting to look like a crack kid on Borderlands or something, but you get kind of the idea. You can do a little bit of, pick up a little bit of detail by using both that ambient occlusion, the masking ambient occlusion, and the masking by cavity. And then once you have that done, what you'd want to do is basically export this thing out. So I would save it. I'm just going to go ahead and save it real quick. Control S. And unfortunately, because it crashed, it's like angry now. Cartoon character examples. We'll do this one 03. Delete 3. Okay. Okay. So now what I want to do is this. We're going to go ahead and we're going to export this out. So I'm going to go, it's a plugin, Z plugin. And you want to do the multi-map exporter. Boop. Now what we want to export out is a normal, which is going to be a comparative map between the high poly and the low poly. That's why we did the subdivision. The texture, because that's what that is, and the mesh. Those are the three things that we're worried about exporting. Okay. Now, what I can do is go down, and you'll see export options. And for the normal map, we want it to be subdivision level 1, because that's our lowest level, which is good. So that's okay. And for the mesh export, I want it to be subdivision level 1. So you want the normal and the mesh export to be the same. And then, let's see, so that's the mesh export. And then the color map, there's really no settings for that. So you do all those. And 2048 for the map size is good. That's probably fine. And we should be good. So now I just hit create all maps. And it's going to want to know where to save it. And I'm just going to go, I'll make a new folder in here. New folder. I'm just going to call it ZBrush Export. All right. And we'll just call this Ugly Kid. Oops. Ugly Kid. All right. That's a good name. And it's going to export out all of those items. So you saw that it actually has to unsubdivide, divide, I don't know, but it has to unsubdivide the model in order to create the things. Okay, so now it says map. So now it's working on each one of these maps. And we wait, and it only took 48 seconds. So now what I can do is check out, that's cool. It didn't even use the stupid folder that I put in there. Okay, well, so if I look at my, this is the bitmap, and it's super scary looking. Okay, or this is the color map. And it also gave me a normal map, which this is the difference between the low poly and the high poly character. Again, it's kind of scary. And then it also gives me this model. Oh, it's going to open up in there. Great. This is the material, which we don't care about, but the OBJ is the model. We can bring that into Maya, and then we're good to go. All right, so that's basically the lump sum of what you need to do, and you basically have now gone through the entire process, of making, yeah, that's fine, of making the character ready for 3D. Let's see. Yeah. And okay, I think it's what, K? Is that right? Nope. I ruined it. Yeah, well. But yeah, so that's that. All right. So good luck.